Right? Up to the tables, and we're going to start, I think, in about 45 seconds. My name is Ann Thompson, and I'm the chair of the Committee on Women. And on behalf at Iowa State University, on behalf of the Committee on Women, I'd like to welcome all of you here this afternoon, yet one more time. And after Angela spoke, I saw a friend in the hall, and I said, "Oh, thanks so much for coming." And she said, "Oh, what do you mean, thank you for coming?" She said, "It's already been a memorable afternoon for me, and I am honored to be here, and I love this sort of event." And when Angela was talking earlier about all of us finding a passion, whether it be flower or something else, I thought one of the things that occurred to me, one of my passions is this kind of group, bringing together women who I think Angela characterized as warriors. And I think we don't tend to see ourselves that way, because most of us are pretty peaceful, but we are people who are trying to do some new and different things in terms of leadership. And I want to thank Angela very much for creating a space for us this afternoon. And as she talked about walking a journey, and she really helped us create a space where we're walking this journey together. All of us are a little, I probably shouldn't use these words because they're kind of violent in comparison to what Angela had to say. However, we're a little bloodied and bruised, I think, from some of our journeys and some of our adventures. And I think having a space where we can exhale, where we can think about the journey, we can think about planning the journey for the future, is a true privilege. So I won't exactly thank you for being here. I'll thank you for being together in this space, because I think we're going to have, and already have had, a very exciting afternoon together. We're very fortunate with the panel that we have put together to continue this theme of talking about the journey that women in Iowa have taken in terms of leadership. And what we're going to do is to extend the kinds of things that Angela started for us. And each of the women on the panel, I've asked, I like stories a lot. And I think as we think about our journeys, I would like to ask each of the women on our panel to share a little bit of their journey in leadership, and also issues that they see for us in Iowa as we walk this journey together. I think that what I'll do is to introduce each panelist and ask a beginning question, and we also will be behaving informally, as women like to do, and we'll welcome questions and interaction. Our first panelist is Sheila McGuire-Riggs. Sheila is the Vice President for Applied Research and Consulting and the Executive Director of the Walmart Foundation. She has a couple doctorate degrees, I like to say it that way. One in dentistry from the University of Iowa, and one in epidemiology from Harvard. She's been recognized by the Business Record as one of the 10 most influential women in Iowa. And we are fortunate indeed to have her with us this afternoon. Sheila?
Thank you, Ann, and good afternoon, warriors. I I want to applaud you all for being here. You all are very dedicated to women's leadership here in Iowa. If you were spending Friday afternoon all together on this beautiful day, so I'm glad to be with you. And as I was so enjoying Angela O's remarks, I was thinking, I bet we are the only set of American citizens convened this afternoon to get to a place of common humanity for Iowa in this case. So again, I'm really thrilled to be with you all here today. And as Ann said, I have 2 doctorates in healthcare, and we'll talk a little bit about my path here, but one of them, again referring to Angela's talk, is a doctorate of medical science. And you were wondering if there was a scientist in the room who could understand this, and I cannot. That's fascinating bit of research. Today I'm just going to talk about some of the 4 or 5 kind of themes that I think emerge from my leadership path here in Iowa. The first thing is, it's not what you know, it's who you know. The second thing is, you've got to ask and speak up. Thirdly, I'm going to try to convince you that you should run meetings. Fourthly, be helpful to others, especially women. And fifthly, it's not what you know, it's who you know. So, in terms of it's not what you know, it's who you know. All you ISU students that are still here, I suggest you get the Girl's Guide to Power and Success. One of the big themes is networking, mentoring, be who you know. Even standing here as somebody who received more education after high school than before high school, I really come to realize that it's really not about getting the A+, about getting the A's. It's really, please, get that B+ and go to lunch. Go out for extracurricular things. Get to know a broad set of people. What I've learned as now a corporate executive, and particularly when I was on the transition team for the Vilsack-Peterson campaign, or new governorship, men and women approach getting a job very differently. I've not hired anyone because they answered an ad. Every hire that I've made and I've witnessed, it's because that person knew someone. That, in fact, we look to each other and say, who do we know who we can hire? So having that network, being in as many networks as possible is very important for getting a job. And in the transition team, it was fascinating. I was head of the vetting for all the department heads. And when men would apply, want to be head of Department of Public Safety or Inspection and Appeals or whatever, we would get 20, 30, 50 letters of recommendations from his network. We wouldn't get any from women. Women weren't calling in the chits to help them get the next job. We'd also get a lot of phone calls. And women just thought, I'll send in my resume, I'll write in my letter how full of merit I am, and I bet I get the job that way. So, I encourage you all to have peers, men and women 5 years older, 10 years older, 40 years older, in your network. Really seek to get them in your network. To me, I think that's the true glass ceiling, is that we do not have the networks. There's a lot of research about unconscious bias toward women, toward minorities. And instead of kind of complaining about it, I've come to the realization we have to act to lower that bias by really purposely getting in to those people 5, 10, 20, 40 years older than we are, into their networks. Just today, as a woman in science, it was interesting, in the front page of the New York Times, Sarah Reimer wrote an article about the continuing problem of women not making gains in academics and science. They quoted a math professor from Michigan, a man, Mel Hochester, who's become very involved in this once he was aware of what was going on. He talked about 4 recent studies in these results. Men are given longer letters of recommendation and are more focused and relevant credentials in that, in terms of bias in hiring. Men and women are more likely to hire a man than a woman with identical background. Women apply for a postdoc fellowship. Those women had to be 2.5 times more productive to get the same score in getting the fellowship. I always thought we just had to work twice as hard. 5 times. And when they choose an orchestra and they put up a screen so they can't tell the gender, women are 30 to 55% more often hired to be in an orchestra. So, the first thing, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Ask. We don't ask. And here's the next book, Women Don't Ask. Great book. Negotiation and the Gender Divide by Linda Babcock and Sarah Lashiver. We don't ask for raises, we don't ask for promotions, we don't ask for help at home. I'll tell you a little story. At the conclusion of my work at Harvard, I had graduated at the top of the class, had gotten all the research awards, gotten all the acclamations, and my professor went to a colleague of mine and handed him an offer from Colgate for a great job. I was stunned. I went into his office and said, gosh, why didn't I get that offer? And he said, well, I didn't think you wanted it. And I said, Chet, if a 6-figure job ever comes along again, I'm interested. I think that we need skill building and negotiation. I see Charlotte Nelson here. Tomorrow there's a workshop at United Way at 8:30 about how to negotiate for salaries. Encourage you to attend. We also need help for not just salaries, but in academics, research space and dollars, and childcare. What you may not know, there is kind of a growing sense across universities that your tenure will, the time you get to you have to get tenure, is extended 1 year for every child you have. They started this at Princeton, and what they found was men took it more often than women, because the women thought they were going to be, black mark against them if they took it. So Princeton just went ahead and made it automatic, so nobody even had to ask for it. The other thing about asking and that you get in this book is that we always are afraid, Angela said, about nice girls don't ask and scaring the boys. And We recently, the Nexus Breakfast Group, one of the sponsors, came to the conclusion that being nice wasn't getting us anywhere. So we issued something called the Nexus Index. It's a set of 10 indicators that point out really how well, or not well, women are doing in Central Iowa on those peak earning potential positions, partners in law firms, and leadership positions, corporate boards, of course, sending women to Washington, D.C. All the numbers were very, very low. But just putting it out there and annually, not only reporting it, but getting groups like Chrysalis Foundation and other groups in Central Iowa to help work on moving the dials, those very important indicators. Another thing about advantage of having a network when you're asking is get some human resource, some HR people into your network. Many women don't know what to ask for. They've got all the benchmark data. Get to know HR people, not right where you work, because they probably won't be able to tell you, but in other companies, and they can tell you not only what the salary benchmark can be, but the other kind of perks that you can get. Thirdly, Run the Meeting, another book, The Roberts Rules of Order. Very good, quick read. So, I encourage you to run the meeting, be seen as a leader. Actions speak louder than words. You get to call on women and men, because there's a lot of research. Men talk freely and use up all the space and air with their thoughts. Running the meeting means you get to set the agenda. You're not given the secretary role. You get to delegate the actions that come from that meeting, which gives you more time to network. And you should be collecting the names and the emails of the people in the meeting so that you can add that to your database for future networking. Fourthly, be helpful to others, especially women. Next book. She Wins, You Win. And I see over at the bookstore they have some other Gail Evans books. She's a fabulous writer. She puts in the book a lot of tips for the team, the women's team. Be a mentor. Be a rainmaker, meaning give your business to a woman accountant, woman lawyer, woman physician. Submit nominations for awards. Connie, I don't know, how many people here know Connie Weimer? Wonderful, wonderful woman ahead of her time. Not only thought about how to submit women's names for awards, she just launched some award programs through the business record. And as Ann pointed out, in one of her publications, they annually select 10 women of influence. And didn't that sound great when Ann Thompson said that about me? When I read that, I'm like, well, that really sounds great. It was only because Connie Weimer thought to have an award program like that my resume now says that. So think about how you can submit names for awards like that so that the resume of women can be more robust. Uncover and share information, like the Nexus Index. Unite all women at all times. I'm very proud to stand here as a board member of the Chrysalis Foundation, a foundation dedicated to improving the lives of women and young girls in Central Iowa, founded by Louise Noun, and Mary Louise Smith is also very involved. As you're thinking about what extracurricular things you can do, be sure to think about, are there some women groups that would be very efficient and effective in helping others. Make team-related choices and weave a female web. get to that critical mass or tipping point. I read in the New York Times today about this weaving of a female web, how when at MIT, they figured out how to reach out even more to get more women into the tenure track in sciences. What they did was not just a typical who do we all know, but said, everyone around this table, you must reach out to 10 of your colleagues around the nation and have them give you 10 names, so that it was much bigger. One of the women remembered a PhD student she had taught who was very wonderful. And she looked for this woman. She was a high school chemistry teacher in Iowa. She talked to this woman. That woman now, 5 years later, is up for tenure at MIT in chemistry. And lastly, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And this is how you really need to take purposeful steps. Start a database. Email, cell phones, contact information. Do fewer emails and do more lunches. Every week, think about somebody new to reach out to and have a bonding experience with. Learn even a little bit of golf. I gotta tell you, there's all these best ball golf tournaments. It doesn't matter that you don't play golf well. You just have to know a little bit of golf. It gets you out having a bonding experience with men and women of all ages. And make up reasons to stay in touch. Another story of mine. At the turn of the millennium, as an epidemiologist, I'm a data geek from way back, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to collect from my friends, my community, just what kind of their life looked like at the turn of the millennium. So, I don't know, some of you here, I think, got a survey in the mail from me at the turn of the millennium with about 30 questions, very simple questions. It took probably 5 minutes to answer. But it was a reason to reach out to say, you're part of my community. I want you to help me describe our community at the turn of the millennium. So with that, those were my reactions to Angela O. And I very much look forward to figuring out how these strategies can be further deployed, and I will apply you in a few minutes.
Thank you very much. Thanks to Sheila for broadening the network, and I sort of see us as creating a web this afternoon. One of the things that I see with her emphasis on networking, and thinking back to what Angela was talking about earlier, I think sometimes we as women are way too much into the approach to life, sort of this sense that if I work hard, if I do all the work for the whole committee, somebody's bound to notice how terrific I am. And how we don't take that time that Angela talked about to exhale, the time to network, the time not to send 5,000 emails, but to have lunch and connect. And I think those 2 points work together very nicely. One of the things that we have in mind this afternoon, and I'm sure it's obvious to you, is that we have women leaders from a number of communities in Iowa. Our next reactor, Mary Chapman, is the Vice President for Community and Workforce Partnerships at Des Moines Area Community College. And I think in one sense, Mary is an expert at tying together some communities. As I look at her background, she works with business, with the community, with education nonprofit communities, serving the underemployed, underutilized populations, and skill force development. So in terms of our goal of bringing together leaders from different communities, I think we're especially privileged to have Mary with us because she brings a deep knowledge and leadership experience in a number of communities. She was also previously the executive dean at the urban campus for Des Moines Area Community College. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you, Ann, for that. What a wonderful introduction. Now, that's a tall order. She's saying bringing communities together. This is a privilege for me this afternoon to be a part of this very distinguished panel and to follow a wonderful woman, Dr. O, and had a wonderful message for us this afternoon. Well, for me to begin, I guess I'd have to go back to the red dirt of Alabama because that's where I came from. Came from Alabama and remember those trips with my family. Every summer we take these family trips, and back in the 50s, early 60s, and no air conditioning. I can remember the car with no air conditioning driving to Alabama to visit our family. And growing up, I never knew that I would be in the place where I am today. I was the first one in my family to go to college. And, I never thought about, I guess, watching and hearing about discrimination and hearing about what we could and could not do. I didn't feel it until after graduating from college and beginning my career path. And then you start seeing certain things. But just to back up, leaving Alabama, growing up in South Bend, Indiana, in an isolated, a racially isolated community, again, not knowing, what the feelings are in terms of feeling different and being treated differently. And then leaving South Bend, spending some time in Kansas, and then coming to Iowa, where I was only going to be here 3 years, just passing through. Now, 30 years later, still here, but wonderful opportunities in Iowa. So it's a wonderful place to be, but there's still more that needs to be done. When I was asked to think about my career path, my journey, and and how I traveled the journey, it was, in my mind, it was in a non-traditional way because I started out as a teacher and an administrator in a K-12 system, and I was on the pathway of being a school superintendent. Always wanted to be a school superintendent, and thought I was doing all the right things, with my education, meeting the right people, and if it didn't exist, create it. When I was in the K-12 system, focusing on women. That was my first attention on women, knowing that especially like in elementary, the majority of the teachers are women, but the administrators are all men. So those of us that were aspiring to leadership roles, there wasn't a venue or an opportunity to come together and network and get the synergy from each other and find out where the gaps were. So we just created our breakfast club. We had, it was my idea, I'll take credit for that, in saying that there has to be an opportunity for women that are aspiring for leadership roles, there has to be a venue for us to come together and to gain skills, to interact with women in business in terms of what does it take to be successful as a leader. And so we established this breakfast club for women in education. And I don't know if you're familiar with School Administrators of Iowa, but at that time, Gaylord Tryon was the executive director and really is a champion of women. And so he took this on as a project and provided the support. And I say this to say that, you know, there is a women's movement, but you also need champions, men that are in other places that can help to advance the movement. But that was my beginnings of leadership and what that means. And as a black woman, you know, there's this, in some ways you feel schizophrenic because, you know, there's the women issues and then there's the black issue. So which one takes priority? And so when you walk in a room, you know, are you looked upon as a woman, or are you looked upon as a black woman? And what are the issues here? And so I think that many women, black women, women of color, in dealing with leadership, that's always an issue. It's always on the table that has to be dealt with. So in leaving K-12, it was a good thing for me. I know when Dr. O said that, you know, your pathway, it doesn't exist. I guess you're building it as you're walking it. You're building the bridge as you walk in the bridge. Well, I never knew that I would end up in community college system, but because I was on my pathway to being a superintendent. But when I was asked to look at a community college and what it means and the opportunities there, I said, you know, that sounds good. So considered the possibilities there. And so in applying for the position of executive dean at Urban Campus, I didn't know what that meant, except leadership. Those skills and those qualities are transferable. If you are a good leader in whichever venue you're in, then those skills are transferable. And so that was the risk that I was taking, was moving from an environment that I was familiar with, you know, knew the players and how to navigate that system into a foreign system, learning new language, learning new practices, learning new politics. That was a risk on my part. And, but it was a good opportunity for me, which I've continued to grow. So that was an example of leadership being transferable. But there's two points that I want to leave with you this afternoon, and that is leadership is situational. In every position that I've held, even with the current one, there are, you know, different levels and different points of leadership in terms of how you use it. And working through, I guess the higher that you go up in an organization, you're making things happen working through other people. And that also plays into the humanity of things. Not only is leadership situational, but leadership is strengthened and it's nurtured if you exist, or your leadership skills are nurtured if you are in an environment that fosters and that nurtures and affirms leadership. So those are the 2 points that kind of stand out for me as I look at leadership and look at my journey. And as I move through the journey, there was a point that Dr. O made about rhythm, that the rhythm doesn't fit anymore. When I was starting on my journey, my career path, and very aggressive and doing all the right things, and even though I had expectations, I still didn't expect that was always there. But now it's looking and seeing how I can bring others along. So on my journey, in the area of leadership, I'm looking for, and strategically looking for ways that where I am, in the place where I am now, how can I touch other lives and open doors and bring others along, whether it's inside the organization where I work or even within the community. Because a leader, you're not only a leader within your organization of where you are, but you also are a leader in your community. And coming from being a woman of color, and as I look around the landscape, like within my community, and looking for others that are in key leadership roles, you see very few in the community that are in the leadership roles. And so that, to me, is troubling. And even in the community college system, women in leadership roles, just all women. There have been advancements, but not enough. I was looking at the Community College Week, I guess the March issue, where there were some statistics that were mentioned that as of 2002, only 19% of the community colleges in this country are led by women. Now that is a devastating statistic, but it's better because in 1986 there were only 5.7% women. So you see some growth, however, there is still more that needs to be done. When there were statements made about, okay, what are the barriers in terms of addressing that issue? Well, there were the typical ones of, discrimination and stereotypes. But there was one that was mentioned that was troubling, and that was women being suppressed by other women. So that is something that in our discourse this afternoon, that it would be nice to have a conversation around that in terms of what's happening now to dispel that, to eliminate that. As I work with, in my role of leadership and in fostering and not only working with others in the community, but I have a strong family tie, and that is we have a lot of women in our family, more women than men. And so in my quest of strengthening leadership within my family, working with my nieces, in educating them to see all the possibilities, and especially my nieces that are bicultural, because there is that dichotomy again of what are the possibilities and who am I, and so being very centered in who you are understanding that fact is very important. So the rhythm doesn't fit anymore was something that stood out for me from the presentation from Dr. O, but also the reality of the world outside, preparing others for you're comfortable where you are as I work with my nieces, but what happens when you step outside your comfort zone? Are you strong enough? Do you have the skills to be able to make it? Networking. That is something as a Black woman, and especially in higher education, and especially in Iowa, very few women of color in leadership roles in Iowa. So who do you connect with? Even though there's some common issues, leadership issues, with your other sisters in the academy, there are other issues that women of color, only women of color can understand. And so who do you network with? Well, when I joined the community college 15 years ago, I found a network of African American CEOs that were within the community college system called the President's Roundtable. And each year, a directory is published of all of the African American presidents, chancellors, vice presidents, and meet twice a year to talk about not only common issues that everyone in higher ed are concerned about, but what are those issues that we as African American leaders within our institution can have an impact on. And this network has been valuable for me as I move within the community college system. Within a phone call away or an email now, if there's an issue that arises. And it's not only women, but also men in the network. So this afternoon, as we talk about networking and the value of networking, and it is, but I hope in our conversation this afternoon, when we talk about women coming together and supporting each other, looking for those champions, identifying and reaffirming those issues that are barriers in moving up in the system, to get beyond that and into action. What do we need to do as a sisterhood to advance? Because in 2005, we should be further along. There shouldn't be any more firsts. And if you can reflect on all of the firsts that we are experiencing in 2005, that shouldn't be. And so my charge that I leave with you this afternoon is that we need to act, and that is coming together with finding ways to venue and come together to act on the issues that need to be addressed. So the two issues, leadership is situational, and having a affirming environment for leadership to be strengthened for women, that's what we need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary, and aren't we lucky to have Mary, a transplanted Iowan, to bring this kind of leadership to us in Iowa. We're also quite on the same page, because I was sitting over there looking at connections with Angela O's remarks, and two things that I wrote down were working toward this joint humanity, and the rhythm doesn't fit anymore. And Mary took those words right out of my mouth, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Roxanne Conlon is not able to be with us this afternoon. Her sister is very ill, and I believe is up at Mayo Clinic, and Roxanne is with her. But I have a sense that Roxanne's with us. I think we're all very well aware of her tremendous contributions to the position of women in Iowa. And so I ask that you place some of your energy and thoughts with her sister and with her. And she would have very much liked to have been here. And maybe next year we'll be able to include Roxanne in our Women's Summit. And I think you all know that this is the first annual Women's Summit. So we will be getting together again. Our next panelist also gets an award. We've been talking about risk-taking and bravery. And Marianne Spicer has definitely done that for us. She agreed on very short notice and agreed enthusiastically to be a member of our panel, and we're very fortunate to have her. In fact, she founded an organization that I think we may want to use this to talk about ourselves, but she's talking about Sisters on Target. And her organization, as I'll tell you in a minute, is different than ours, but it sounds like kind of the same thing. And I think given our discussions and our feeling of community this afternoon, maybe she'd let us borrow a little bit of that as we think of ourselves and our quest to improve the situation in Iowa with respect to women in leadership, thinking of ourselves as Sisters on Target. Marianne Spicer is on the board of directors of the Iowa Women in Public Policy. She is the founder of this organization called Sisters on Target, which encourages young African American women to get involved in community leadership. She taught at Hoover High School and is currently on the State Employment Commission. So welcome, Marianne.